How to respond. When he reaches out after silence, let me tell you something. When a man reaches out after going silent, after ghosting, vanishing, pulling back, whatever you want to call it, that moment is not about his message. It's about your mirror. You see, silence reveals more than words ever could. And during that silence, you changed, you cried, you questioned, you replayed every word, every text, every moment trying to figure out what went wrong. But eventually, you grew. Now here he comes out of nowhere. Hey, been thinking about you. Or maybe it's, sorry I've been MIA. Maybe he's acting like nothing even happened. Let me break it down to you like this. His return is not your reward. His message is not proof that you were worth it all along. Baby, you were already worth it, even when he forgot, ignored, or abandoned that truth. So how do you respond? You respond like a woman who's done the healing, not the woman waiting for an apology, not the girl hoping he finally saw her worth. You respond like a woman who realized her value, even in his absence. You don't respond to validate him. You respond to honor you, if you do respond. And that's a choice, not an obligation. Make sure your words reflect who you are now, not who you were when he left. Don't let his sudden reappearance make you shrink. Maybe he reached out because he regrets it. Maybe he reached out because it's lonely out there. Maybe he just wants to know if he still has access. Access is earned. You don't just give it back because he remembered you exist. You don't confuse presence with progress. Showing up after silence is easy. Consistency after returning, that's what proves something. You want to know how to respond with peace, with power, with poise. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to pretend you didn't care. But you do have to remember who you became. You became a woman who didn't fall apart when he left. You became a woman who rebuilt herself in the quiet. So if you answer that message, don't do it with hope in your throat and pain in your chest. Do it with clarity in your mind and strength in your spirit. And maybe the best response is no response at all. Not out of bitterness, but out of growth. Because sometimes the silence that healed you is the answer. And if you do decide to engage, set the tone. Don't be afraid to say, I'm not the same woman you walked away from. Let him know. If he wants a seat at your table now, it comes with different rules, different energy, and a whole new version of you. Because you're not just responding to a message. You're responding with maturity, with dignity, with power. So don't let his return disturb the peace you fought so hard to build. Because baby, if he had to lose you to find your value, then it's his silence that should be permanent. When a man breaks his silence and finally reaches out, the emotional reaction can be intense, sudden butterflies in your stomach, a flood of memories, that tiny flicker of hope you thought was gone. Maybe it's a text at midnight, a casual, hey stranger, or something deeper like, I've been thinking about you. But no matter how he chooses to return, the moment hits hard, and it's easy, almost automatic, to want to respond immediately. You may feel excited, confused, nervous, or even validated. But before you type a single word, you need to pause. Because what you do in that pause can change everything. See, a man reaching out after silence isn't always a sign of growth. Sometimes it's guilt. Sometimes it's boredom. Sometimes it's nothing more than ego checking in to see if you're still available. That's why the pause matters. The pause gives you space to think clearly, not emotionally, but wisely. And in that pause, you ask the most important question: why now? Why did he go silent in the first place? Did he leave without explanation? Did he breadcrumb you? Did he ghost you and expect you to wait in emotional limbo while he figured himself out? You deserve clarity on those things before even considering what comes next. His reappearance isn't automatically a redemption story. Just because someone returns doesn't mean they've changed. People often come back out of convenience, not commitment. Out of curiosity, not conviction. And if you respond too quickly, if you get caught in the nostalgia or the fantasy, you might welcome someone who hasn't earned the right to be back in your life. So pause. Not to play games, but to protect your peace. To ask yourself some real questions. What do I need right now? What did I learn in his silence? Am I responding because I want to, or because I still need closure? Because when someone disappears and then reappears, it can awaken parts of you that you thought were healed. It can make you question your progress. That's why the pause is sacred. It reminds you that healing isn't about silence being broken. It's about what you did during that silence. You got stronger. You got wiser. You stopped checking your phone. You stopped overanalyzing. You moved forward. Don't let a sudden drag you back into emotional quicksand. And while you're in that pause, observe his words. Are they shallow or sincere? Is he acknowledging the silence or avoiding it? Is he taking responsibility or acting like nothing ever happened? A man who respects you will address what happened. He won't gaslight you with small talk or pretend the silence didn't cut deep. Look for consistency, not convenience. Look for effort, not excuses. And most importantly, look within. Your intuition already knows what's real. If you feel like his message is coming from a place of guilt, ego, or loneliness, don't silence that inner voice just because it feels good to hear from him again. Remember, your heart is not a hotel he can check in and out of when it suits him. Your peace is not up for negotiation. That pause before you respond is not weakness, it's wisdom. It says, I value myself enough to question your timing. And it says, just because you reached out doesn't mean you get access. So when he reaches out, don't rush. You don't owe anyone instant access to your time or emotions. You owe yourself clarity. You owe yourself truth. You owe yourself the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions, confusion, or closure delays. The power isn't in his message. The power is in your response, or lack thereof. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Sometimes silence is your final answer. And other times, your response can be calm, direct, and self-honoring. Either way, let your next move come from strength, not longing. From wisdom, not weakness. From healing, not hoping. Because if he couldn't appreciate your presence before, let your pause remind him that you're not someone he can reach for casually. Let him feel that your world didn't stop when he left. And it sure won't spin differently just because he's back. You are not the same woman who once waited by the phone. Just because he reached out doesn't mean he earned a re-entry into your life. That message, whether it's a late night text, a voice note filled with nostalgia, or a random thinking about you, might stir something in your heart. It might catch you off guard. It might make your breath hitch for a moment. But feelings alone aren't enough to reopen doors that were closed for a reason. Here's the truth: your heart can still care, still ache a little, and still miss him. But your response must come from your standards, not your emotions, because emotions are temporary. Emotions react in real time. They want comfort, they want answers, they want closure. But your standards, they protect your future. They guard your peace. They represent the version of you who refused to stay broken. He doesn't get to walk back into your life just because he remembered how much you meant. He doesn't get to skip the growth, the ownership, apology, and the efforts simply because you still feel something. Feelings do not equal access. Access is earned. Respectfully, intentionally, and consistently. Let's be honest. There was a time when you would have answered that message in seconds. When you would have poured your heart out the moment he returned. When you would have seen his presence as a sign to hope again. But that version of you, she waited, she cried, she wondered. She learned the hard way that love without respect is emotional starvation. And during the silence, his silence, you didn't just sit still, you transformed. You evolved into a woman who chose herself, a woman who rebuilt her confidence, her boundaries, her identity. A woman who learned that waiting on someone to choose you is the fastest way to lose yourself. So now that he's reaching out again, he's not meeting the same woman he walked away from. He's meeting the woman who survived the absence. The woman who turned loneliness into lessons. The woman who found her voice in the quiet. The woman who became whole without him. And that woman doesn't respond just because her heart flutters. She responds based on who she is now, grounded, healed, and clear on what she will and will not accept. It doesn't mean you're cold. It doesn't mean you've stopped feeling. It means you've started choosing better. Because love isn't just about how you feel about someone. It's about how they treat you. If he didn't respect your presence, if he ignored your needs, if he chose silence over communication, then his return must come with more than words. It must come with change. You are not here to soothe someone's guilt. You are not here to serve as emotional comfort. You are not here to reward inconsistency with acceptance. You are here to be loved fully or not at all. And that standard, that's not negotiable. So when he returns, let him meet the version of you that bloomed in his absence. Let him meet the woman who no longer begs for clarity, who no longer accepts crumbs, who no longer entertains empty gestures disguised as connection. If he wants a place in your life again, let him prove it with actions, with effort, with emotional maturity. Let him earn the seat at your table, not because your heart is still soft, but because your standards are still strong. Because at the end of the day, it's not about being cruel or unforgiving. It's about being wise with what you allow. It's about honoring the journey you took to heal. It's about remembering how much it cost you to get to this version of yourself. And if someone wants access to that woman now, they need to bring more than the same behavior that once broke her. So yes, you may still feel something when he reaches out, but that doesn't mean he gets a free pass. It means you're human. It means you're layered. But now, you lead with your standards. You respond as the woman you became, not the one who waited, but the one who rose. Let's get one thing straight. When he finally breaks his silence and sends that message, that call, that "I miss you" text, that moment is not about him. It's not about what he says, how he says it, or even why he says it. That moment is about you. Because the power is not in his message. It's in how you choose to respond. We often give too much weight to someone's return. We treat their words like proof of growth, like evidence that our patience or pain was finally seen. But the truth is, words are easy. Reaching out is easy. Saying, "I miss you," or "I've been thinking about you" is easy. What's not easy? Change, consistency, accountability. That's what separates a real return from a recycled pattern. So, when he finally shows up again, the question is not, what does this mean? The real question is, what do I choose to do with this? That's where your power lies. You get to decide whether to welcome him back with the same access or to raise the standards he must now meet. You get to decide whether you fall back into old patterns or stand in the strength you found when he was gone. You are not powerless just because you once loved him. You are powerful because you loved yourself enough to heal without him. And here's what many don't understand. Silence teaches. Silence is not just absence, it's revelation. It shows you who checks in, who disappears, who values your presence, and who only notices your worth when it's no longer available. Silence taught you lessons that his presence never did. In that quiet space, you found clarity. You discovered what you deserve. You stopped second-guessing yourself. You cried, yes, but you also grew. You rebuilt your self-respect piece by piece. And if he couldn't be there for that process, he doesn't get to bypass it now just because he remembered you exist. So, ask yourself, do I let him back in the same way he left? Does he get the same version of you who accepted breadcrumbs, who made excuses, who hoped he'd change? Or does he now have to face the version of you who knows her worth? The version who doesn't shrink when someone leaves. The version who doesn't chase closure. The version who doesn't mistake attention for intention. That version of you. The one who evolved, healed, and rose in the silence. That woman gets to choose how the story continues, not him. Maybe he came back expecting everything to be like it was. Maybe he thought time would soften the boundary. Maybe he assumed the door would still be open. But the real growth is in you saying, I'm not who I was when you left. I don't move the same. I don't love the same. I don't respond the same. That's power. And power doesn't always mean you cut him off. Power means you respond from a place of strength, not scarcity. From clarity, not confusion. From peace, not pain. You don't owe him bitterness, but you don't owe him access either. What you owe is truth to yourself, to the woman who waited, cried, healed, and rebuilt. Let your response reflect your growth. You don't need to prove anything. Your growth is the proof. You don't need to beg for recognition. Your silence spoke volumes. You don't need to accept his return as a compliment. His absence already gave you the space to become better. So when he reaches out, remember, the message isn't the power move. Your response is. Whether you choose to reply or remain silent, whether you allow a conversation or close the chapter, do it as the woman you've become, not the woman who was left waiting. Because your growth is not a revolving door. Your healing is not a game. And your peace is not something you gamble for someone who didn't protect it the first time.